Survival starts in the core. On the mysterious planet Far Eden, a courageous human survivor, Jewel Adams, joins with her charming Corebot companions on an epic adventure to save mankind. Exotic Grunt Gaming here. Darth Ben60 will be reviewing Recore on the Xbox One. So, before we really get into it, what are your general thoughts on the game?
My general thoughts on Recore is that Recore is a great game when it comes to its platforming and its frantic combat. And it falls short when you're talking about the open world they deliver. Some of the choices about going into the dungeons and the story itself. So to go in those more depth, at least the bad parts of the game, just to get it out of the way. The story is very, well, I would say it's emotional and like touching almost to a point. It is very, very shallow, very, it's very quick, and really there's not a lot going on here. You're a girl, you're Jewel, you're on Far Eden, the next Earth, hopefully after terraforming, and your job is to get the terraform project back to working again. And it's a great idea, but really that's the story. That's it. Yeah. Like, I just explained the whole story to you. And there really wasn't much more to that. There was a couple moments that were good, that were interesting, but nothing really changes that story. The open world kind of gets a knockoff from me because while I understand that this is a world that needs to go through terraforming to be livable, you literally are just in a desert the whole game. Yeah. That you aren't in dungeons. So it gets to a point where it's just seeing the same thing over and over again. And it kind of like wears down on you, one grain of sand, the same as any other.
Okay. So I guess that kind of leads into this next question, but thinking back to platformers that are still alive today and still very popular, and obviously what most people would consider the greatest one ever made, but the Super Mario games, obviously a very different game, delivering different things, but it had some repetitiveness in it. But how does Recore itself, it sounds like it defines itself and separates itself from that kind of genre of platforming games? It seems like it's trying to make a new genre of itself where platforming games can also become open world games in a gaming community where it seems open world games are starting to really dominate a lot more. How does Recore set itself apart from a platformer that's so great like Super Mario and things like that?
All right. I think that the thing that sets Recore apart from other platformers is its combat. Mm-hmm. I feel like in most platformers, combat is very weak. Mario games, I think combat's very weak. Mm-hmm. I think their platforming elements are excellent, but combat's kind of weak. Games I played when I was younger, like Sly Cooper or Jak and Dexter, their combat I felt like was also very weak, but very fun platforming action. And I think Recore does a very good job of bringing combat into this platforming world. It's not hard. It's a frantic third-person shooter. It's really a lot of like color matching, so it's almost kind of like a puzzle. You have to have this color to really hurt this enemy, things like that. And while you're never really fighting while doing platforming, I think it's good to have something else to do besides the platforming in the world, because there's the basis of the game is you got to collect these prismatic cores to restart the terraforming, and there's dungeons that have prismatic cores scattered across the open world, and how you get them, and there's two type of dungeons. There's the traversal dungeon, what is your platforming dungeon, and the combat dungeon. And I think that's one good thing they did with the open world, is have those two different type of dungeons throughout. So going in, you can either have a dungeon that's all about the fighting aspect of the game, what's fun because it's just different, and then one that's about the platforming, what I think when Recore really shines, because I think it excels at its platforming elements.
Interesting. Another question would be, when you start to progress through the game, I know it's open world, so It might not be as linear as almost every other platforming game, but most other platforming games, the platforming becomes more difficult as the game gets on because you become more conditioned to how the mechanics work, and they'll introduce new mechanics. Does Recore do the same thing, or is it kind of like there's a tutorial in the beginning to learn all the mechanics, and then you kind of know how to play the game, or as you go on, do the mechanics become more difficult?
Oh, they become much more difficult. The game starts throwing more and more elements at you. More environmental things you have to pay attention to. More like, I would say almost like traps to fall to. Like it wants you to jump on this platform, but you really shouldn't. It definitely gets harder as you go along. And I like that part because it keeps you constantly challenged on the platforming side. Though the thing that actually falls back is the action, because the action just gets easier, actually, the combat. At the beginning, I found it was difficult, or at least semi-challenging, but towards the end, they didn't really introduce any new types of enemies or any new like mechanics that made it more difficult. So at the end, I felt like I was walking through battles.
And what might be at least my last question is, you mentioned a lot of things that make this game sound like, as we kind of already discussed, an open world game, but it has dungeons and whatnot. Also, the open world, a lot of area to traverse. Is there a progression system in it that seems replayable or meaningful, or is it kind of more like this is your character, it's kind of already set in stone what their abilities are, and this is kind of how you're going to progress through the game? You need to learn the mechanics.
Definitely the second. There's really no progression to your character. Your character gets stronger in the sense that their energy rifle gets stronger.
Okay.
Your core bots can get stronger, and you can upgrade your core bots, but you yourself don't change.
Okay.
Yeah, so with the core bot upgrade, I guess there's more reason to traverse and find these things, but that kind of open world element is where the game fails, I would say. It just doesn't really work that well. Like, to go through, you have a reason to go through the dungeons progression-wise to collect the prismatic cores, but it's a forced progression. The biggest complaint I have on the game is that forced progression of collecting the prismatic cores, and it comes in during the main story. During the main story, you're climbing this tower, and to get to the end of the tower, you have to have a set amount of prismatic cores. Mm-hmm. Each level, you have to have 5 more than the last level.
Okay.
So I saw this at the beginning, got 3 floors done out of 5, and was like, okay, I need to go get 10 more cores so I can go to the last level. So I got 10 more. And then all of a sudden, you need another 5 after that to get to the room after the last level. And where I already felt cheated before, having to go back out into this open world and like having to go to these things instead of wanting to, mm-hmm. I felt like, all right, I did it. I can now finish the story. I can have fun, see it, do what I want to do. Then all of a sudden, it made me go back out again into this open world. And it was something I was mentally prepared for because I had read it in reviews on like IGN. But I was severely disappointed when it actually happened.
Yeah, that certainly is there is a fine line in games between what restrictions the developers put on the player themselves in that kind of sense, and what you're able to do throughout the game and how open it is. And but with that, and we've obviously discussed some disappointments, but also some good things that the game was able to do, and kind of reinvigorating the market for a platforming genre, which I think is also important. What would you, numbers wise, because we love numbers and people want to hear the numbers because that's a little bit more of an objective thing to look at. What would you give it as a number for a review?
I would give it a 7.2.
Okay.
I think while you're platforming and while you're shooting things, the game excels. I think it's very fun, and if you're looking for a platformer, it's a good choice. With this sort of forced progression on you of having to go collect these prismatic cores, and then sometimes to get into dungeons you don't have enough prismatic cores, so you have to go get some in the open world, and then sometimes you have to collect cell bots to go into dungeons, I think there's a lot of gaps that try to stop you from going into the dungeons, and the dungeons are the best part of the game. The dungeons are extremely fun.
Yeah.
If you could just go into the game and play just the dungeons, I would probably give it like a 9 or a 10. The dungeons are extremely fun to play through. But some choices I feel hold it back.
Yeah.
So I would give it a 7.2.
Okay. Well, that was our the review from Darthman60 of Recore from Exotic Grunt, and our next video will be, I don't even know what right now.